Okay, wait. I think this might help a bit. Okay, here I am. Okay, wait. I think. Okay, sorry. Phone. We've been live for about 5 minutes, but okay. I'm gonna wait for some people to get on the stream. I'm gonna wait for you guys. I want to thank you all for everyone that's gonna come in advance. This is a very important day for me, so I'm gonna just wait for you guys to get in here. And let's see who's in the chat. Rookie Critic, hey man, nice of you to drop by. All is good. What's up, bro? And the answer is all is good. I'm just waiting for you guys to join in. And let's see. 4 a.m. I think I made a mistake. No, I actually meant 4 p.m. 4 p.m. I think PST. I did I screw up the time? I think I screwed up the time. 4 a.m. Hold on. Let's see. Did I screw this up? Let's check Twitter real quick. No, it actually said live in 45 minutes. I think Flip took care of this. So, man, you're stressing me out, man. Let's see if anyone else. Yeah. Well, I guess people can catch the replay, but I also want to see who else could make it. Let's see. Where are my peeps at? Okay. Yeah, I definitely did screw up with the whole streaming thing. Yeah, I guess I understand what I did right now. Okay. So up to now, it's just you and me and you. I really have to find it. When your whole world is damn phones. I hope they do. I really do. Hold on, there we go. I'm also monitoring the situation from my phone as well. And let's see. I mean, if I go back onto my phone and I check the whole time app thing, I just want to make sure. Okay, right now it's 4 p.m., 7 p.m. EST. Oh my, I think I recognize my mistake right now. I think I said it the other way around. We'll fix it. We'll fix it right now, actually. Okay, go. No, I think I actually got it right. 7 EST. Yeah. Yeah, no, it's all good. It's all good. We're waiting for the rest. I'm going to go live in about, no, I'm actually going to start this thing in about, I don't know. I'm thinking, I'm thinking in the next, maybe, I think I can hold out for about 5 minutes. See, let's get people on the chat. Oh boy. I'm going to mute the mic a little bit. I'm just going to get myself some water. I'll be back in a few. Έλα ρε. Έλα Αγγελακό. Ποιος είναι? Έλα. Γιάκος είσαι. I'm also talking to some of my friends from Greece. They're also going to be watching the broadcast. Κάτσε τώρα να μπει λίγος κόσμος εδώ πέρα και να ξεκινήσουμε. There's going to be a language barrier for the rest of you, but I can understand what everyone's saying, and that's the best part. Σε λιγάκι θα τους δώσω λίγο ακόμα να πούνε. Ναι ρε, τι άμα δω ότι δεν έρθει κανένας έχει δηλωτούλα. Κανονικά. Ή αλλιώς θα το αφηγηθώ, θα πιάσουν replay και θα τέτοιο. Ναι. Εύκολα. I think I should put some music, but it's also going to be copyrighted. Ναι, δεν έχει, θα κάτσω εγώ περιμένω. Δεν έχει πολύ τώρα. Όλε! Anyway. Κάτσε να μιουτάρω λίγο, να βάλω λίγο νερό γιατί έχω γκανιάξει και έρχομαι σε λίγο. I'm gonna restart this whole thing in a few. So for the rest, if you actually catch this replay, there's going to be a huge time frame. I think that you're going to have to catch this from after the 15th minute. So yeah. Εγώ έβαλα κρασί, φίλε. Let's see. Hey, Rookie, still there? Right, just checking. Oh, Tsupuro. Man, I love that stuff. Rookie, remember that time that you were talking about the drinks and all that stuff? Tsupuro is something that can actually... Man, you're going to go blind with that stuff. It is really powerful. And my friend here, he makes homemade wine, homemade alcoholic beverages. Because the ones that you get from the store taste like shit. He makes them a lot better. He makes the best white wine that I've ever tasted, actually. I hate white wine, but it's like he put honey in that thing. Oh boy. So, yeah, we've got 3-4 people in the chat, so I guess that it is about time that I well, I'm gonna start. So for the rest of the people that are gonna be catching this much later in the replay, excuse me, I just want to I'm going to start off and I'm going to give you an introduction about what this is about, and when I'm done, you can ask me a few questions before I have to go again, and we'll have some things to discuss and talk about. Welcome to my fan fiction, officially 14 minutes in, almost, and the story is a very long one. Now, as I've mentioned to some of you in the past, I wanted to write a Star Wars fan fiction ever since I was a boy. And at the age of 16, when a lot of things had been happening and going on around in my life, I decided to devote my my passion for Star Wars. Flips in the chat too. Mongo's Big Things is in the chat too. Thank you guys for coming. I really appreciate this. So, I was saying that in the past, I experienced a few things, and I decided to make a Star Wars story about it because it was one of the best coping mechanisms that I had, and I wanted to be able to relay something one day. Playing the video games was not just enough. I wanted to have my own adventure, to explain my own story, to write my own story and write down some themes, psychological, mythological, religious, philosophical, that people can look up to one day and understand. So, so far, I want to show my appreciation and thank the people that have made it up to here so far. Thank you so much. I really appreciate this. I want you to know that this is something both exciting and terrifying for me, because it is something that I've been working on for a very long time. Now, the era is, of course, 14. It begins 14 years after the age, after the Battle of Endor. And the Imperials are, of course, just like in the old Jedi Academy games, they are remnants. They are not completely dispersed and destroyed, because you don't get, you don't have a whole faction disappear from one day to the next. So the New Republic is a new government, and as if anyone knows anything about history, establishing a new government from scratch, from nothing after uh, war, is not something that you can just do that easily. And it's a very crucial time, and my focus will be around there. We will have some favorite characters that we know from Legends, some of them. Most of the original trilogy and legacy characters will also play a very important role in my story, because who wouldn't want to write a fan fiction about them hanging out in a cantina with Han Solo, or training with with Luke Skywalker? We'll be here for you, Rook. Um, and also exploring the galaxy and showing people what they perceive in the Force, right? So that's what I wanted to. That's what I wanted to relay in my fan fiction. Now, the main character is obviously based on my experiences, so I'm actually going to be talking about my life experiences and things that I understand through my character, because I know myself better. That's why. And I don't feel comfortable about writing other people's stories. It makes me feel like I'm a star. Experience with my friends and family, quoting your story just to one person. Okay, so right now I said that chronologically, what I'm going to be reading to you is 3 years. No, sorry, 3 to 6 months before the main events of the timeline that I will call the, let's call it the original trilogy timeline. Okay, yeah, you get the my main timeline has got, it starts smack bang with the middle of a war. And what I'm going to read to you guys is what happened just, just before this war started, a few events that take place in this war. And right now, what I'm writing, what I'm working on, the new ground that I'm actually laying, is the aftermath of the current war that I'm going to be talking about right now. So, let me not drone on the overall plot. Let me just tell you what I have for you guys today. Okay, so for all those that don't know, today marks one of the most important experiences in my lifetime. 10 years ago, I had the adventure of a lifetime with my friends, my best friends. In a school trip, if you take Spider-Man Far From Home minus the holograms and Spider-Man and Quentin Beck, spoiler alert for those who haven't seen Far From Home, but what's the point after Endgame anyway? But yeah, basically taking a school trip, field trip, to Prague, and I experienced a lot of things in that field trip that day, and it actually inspired me to write a fan fiction. The Clone Wars also came out at that time, which was kind of cool, and the fact that we only got 3 years of the clones is just too little for me. And I'm just gonna I'm gonna weave them nicely into my story. But this is essentially, months before the main event takes place. So let us begin with one of the chapters that I wrote, and there's another two that link into the story, and I will let you guys know when I'm done. So I'm going to start off. I'm going to be checking, obviously, what's going on in the chat. So when I'm done with like a big paragraph or something, I might take a short break to see what's going on with the chat. And well, let's get started, because I see we have 7 people in the house. Thank you so much for coming. I really appreciate your support. Leave a like. This is a very important thing for me. So let's do it. Okay, chapter 1, The Crystal Harvest. On the frozen surface of the ancient planet of Ilum touches down a Yavin runner with 5 Jedi Academy students and 2 masters accompanying them. They have been chosen to harvest their very own Kyber crystal in order to assemble their lightsaber. During the first batch of Jedi learners that Luke Skywalker would escort to Ilum, the colorations of their lightsaber blades would be much more different to the regular colors such as green, blue, and what was prevalent in the past. Luke suspected this had to do with the teachings he passed on to his students, due to the fact that he did not get a lot to learn from Obi-Wan and Yoda. A Jedi normally knows compassion, yet also implies restraint that can pass as indifference in their method so as not to become attached. It was believed that this attachment is what can make a Jedi vulnerable to the dark side, as it preys on those who give in to their emotions. However, Luke was perhaps one of very few Jedi that could turn this around. He encourages attachment, as it was what helped rescue his friends back in the day. It was his attachment and his faith in his friends and father that made him able to topple the Empire and defeat the evil Emperor. This way of compassionate thinking has been ingrained in the new generation of Jedi, and it is because of this approach to learn the Force that it translates their coloration of their lightsabers to be this way. The colors mainly being yellow, orange, and pink. Green and blue has become so scarce that Jedi students look with awe every time Luke spars with his own lightsaber against the training droids of the Academy. But there are a few exceptions, as Masters Sendas Pass and Aris Qualtor each possessed a green blade. But for a student, however, there has been no record so far of anyone harvesting a Kyber crystal that emits a green-bladed color. This puts Luke into thought occasionally, and at times he would have to revise his teachings in case he had to make a few amends to his tutoring methodology. During this gathering, Luke would not be present, and he sends Jedi Master Sendas Pass and Jaden Kor to escort the esteemed Padawans instead. He is curious to see if a different Jedi, can produce different results. The feedback of his colleagues could be useful, as a different perspective can help widen his perception of things. This group of Jedi trainees are of a different age group and way past the age of the Padawans of old. Luke wanted to see if someone that is slightly older than a child can harvest a Kyber crystal for himself or herself. Of course, it can also be beneficial for a child to become indoctrinated in the ways of the Force as early in life as possible. Sorry about that. But the gathering holds many dangers that perhaps an adolescent can brave much better than a child. After all, Luke Skywalker started at the age of 19 to learn the ways of the Force, and despite the difficulties and challenges along the way, he made it. He wanted to see if it can be redone. There are always paths to walk full of challenges, losses, death, sacrifice, and anything that pushes oneself to grow, no matter what age they start their training off. Jaden and Sendas gave and guided the Padawans to the entrance of the cave. It is not the same as the one Yoda went through years earlier, but the Force will always open new doorways into the caves for those who are eager enough to seek them. The test set before the young Jedi hopefuls is one as old as time itself. Through the Force, they must figure out and overcome the part of themselves that weighs them down. Those parts, or the traits, that are not inherently dark in nature. Nobody is truly evil unless they feed the negative emotions inside them that will inevitably hold them back. And to compensate for this, the Sith of old would cover their hindrances up with arrogance and overconfidence to hide their frailty. There are Sith, however, that transcended their shackles of their emotions and became much, much more. One can say that they were truly free. Alas, no, the dark side will always hold a leverage against you. As the group entered the chilly caves of Ilum, they were awestruck at the beauty of the cavern and the crystallized interior. And still, despite it being so rich and abundant with Kyber crystals, only a tiny piece will call out to them and bond with them in a symbiotic way. "Welcome to Ilum," Master Pass said. We are here because you are advancing to the next step of Jedihood. Constructing a lightsaber is a rite of passage for all Jedi, and a crucial time in your training. Jaden Core paced slowly in parallel with the students before him, and he explained while showing the magnificent ceiling that was fitted with a mosaic of beautiful crystals. In order for you to craft your lightsaber, you need to find a crystal, but not any crystal will do. You must calm your minds and listen to the Force. It will guide you in a path that is unique to each of you. There is a lesson behind every challenge you may face. Be patient and follow through. Only you can find the answer to whatever puzzle lies ahead. Master Pass waited for Jaden to finish as he politely awaited to give his students an encouragement to take their assignment to heart. If you quiet your mind, you can hear the crystals singing in harmony, a sweet melody with the lyrics written by the Force itself. And if you put your ears to it, you will hear your very own crystal singing its own tune, ready to be found by you. Master Sendas Pass said enthusiastically. The students were kind of amused, but one, Terry Anados, who was the Padawan under the tutelage of Master Pass. Terry Anados was a human male, with an average height and weight for a 17-year-old, brown hair and hazel eyes. But whatever he lacked physically, he made up greatly for it in the Force. He was found by Master Pass during a mission to the Johannai system to disrupt the operations of the Kangor clan based there. The clan had been pillaging the town Terry was born in for over 10 years. At the time, he was only 6 when Master Pass had discovered him in the ruins of his home. That had been destroyed by the Kangors, of course. A detonator went off in the floor his parents were in, with his other 2 siblings in their arm. Terry was in his own room in the upper level. When the blast killed his family, it also tore the ceiling down with him on it, and the debris crushed his parents and his 2 brothers underneath. Only he survived. Jaden stepped in once again to wrap up the briefing because the time for the harvest was limited. Jaden pointed to the sunlit entrance of the cave while looking back at his students and said, "You will also have to take into account that once the sun sets, everything will freeze up, including the entrance of the cave with all of us in it. After that happens, we will be stuck for a rotation, a whole rotation in here, and we're kind of short on supplies for a sleepover at Ilum. But hey, no pressure, in you go into the deeper caverns. After each one of you to the last, has her crystal, we can leave this place." The Padawans were shocked after the last bit of information and suddenly felt the pressure to find their crystal. As the 5 Padawans entered the tunnel that led deeper into the cave, Kira, the oldest of the group, human female, aged 20, with a medium long hazel hair, medium build, and hairs and eyes to match. Hazel, that is. Suddenly, she got frustrated and said, "How can we focus on finding a crystal, and at the same time, we also have to hurry so that we don't freeze in here?" Terry smiled and said very softly as to comfort her, "Well, it is a Jedi's duty to manage patience and pressure." Kira let those words sink in as he walked past her. She looked deep into the tunnels that seemed endless. "How much further must we go, guys?" she asked. But there was no response from anyone. She turned around to see why no one was talking, but she realized that there was nobody there. "What the? Where'd they go?" "They were just," she gasped in panic while frantically turning her head around, trying to establish her surroundings that seemed to have also changed. This was shocking and weird for her at the same time. In her haste to find her crystal, she lost her footing to what seemed to a bottomless pit. She was too shocked to scream. She finally fell into a chamber with 2 pillars holding the ceiling at each side, and in the center there were crystals littered everywhere, and this made her even more anxious. "Which one is mine?" she uttered softly while she was scanning the chamber. Suddenly, as she was browsing, she stumbled upon a small altar-like surface. That's what I want to say. With 3 steps to it. On the altar, and encased in a thick layer of ice, lay a small cluster of crystals. She fixed her gaze upon it. thinking it might be the one. She tried to break it open with a punch, but she underestimated the density of the transparent ice in front of her despite it cracking. She could open it with another punch, but she thought that the effort would expend herself needlessly. It felt like she broke her arm afterwards, but Kira was headstrong and had enough to give it another go. But she thought it best to reserve her strength for when she needs to escape the cavern. As if that wasn't enough, there was a small indentation in the wall exactly aligned with the two pillars that held the ceiling together. Sunlight shone through the indentation exactly on the pillars that concentrated light and seemed to be melting them. One shock after the other seemed to overload her senses that brought her human instincts forward, those of panic. For a moment she gave into it, but she remembered to ignore her instincts in her moment of peril, as she was taught by her master, Jaden Core. Okay, so far, so good. Let me see what you guys are up to in the chat. I just also want to take a break because my mouth is dry as shit. Whew. Okay, so no activity in the chat. I guess I'll carry on right now. Let me just take another sip. Okay. Let's continue. The remaining 4 Jedi were caught off guard to see that Kira just vanished. Lobaka, the son of the mighty Chewbacca, growled worryingly as Ben Skywalker, who needs no introduction, responded. "Think this might be part of the test?" he said. Lobaka responded with a short, faint growl as Ben turned towards Terry because it was him he wanted a response from. But he had disappeared too. Ben's blue eyes bulged out of disbelief. "Maybe you spoke too soon," said Mark. Terry entered a part of the caverns where huge icicles had crashed on the floor and collapsed all over the place. His greatest fear was also his greatest nightmare, the day he lost his family. He doesn't want that to happen again with the new one that he has found. With a trick of the Force and due to its amplification on Ilum, Terry saw the very same ruins of his old home shaped by the debris of ice. The vision was as clear as day. Terry panicked. Oh no! 3 remained in the depths of the caverns of Ilum, a young Wookiee and 2 even younger humans compared to it. Lobaka anticipated an ice pillar crashing down on him, and due to his fast reflexes, he managed to hold on to it in time, hoping his superior strength could stop its trajectory. But instead, it brought him down as the whole bulk of the pillar tore through the floor. He landed in a clearing where the walls were again dressed in crystals. He picked himself up and tried to focus on how to find one for his lightsaber. A pure Wookiee at heart with a promising future, the Force was indeed strong in him. It guided him to the song of his kyber crystal that was singing. A glacier a few feet above him on the surface was shifting, and at that moment it caused the geometry of the cavern to shift as well. It pushed a huge block against Lobaka. He put his hands against the ice that could crush him beneath it. His strength was all that rested between his survival and his death. Lobaka let out a desperate growl that echoed in the ice-cold caverns. Ben was in doubt about the whole test, the whole thing. They all were. They panicked for a second, courting the possibility that this might be their death. But no, it can't be. They're Jedi, right? This is not death. There's only the Force, at least on Ilum. That's what the code says. Mark and Ben had each other's backs, but they would too eventually split up as the Force would prepare both of them for their own respective tests. Mark thought he heard a song. Perhaps his very own crystal was not too far from his reach. He ran through the caverns trying to follow the song he heard, but when the corridor led into an expanded chamber of crystals that all sang their own song, Mark was baffled, almost deafening to his ears. How could he be hearing all the crystals sing? Only one could call to him. He examined the crystals up close, trying to figure out which one belonged to him, but a feeling inside told him that none did. It frustrated him, and the crystals were as if they were mocking him, being able to hear their melody, but not being able to harvest a single one. The song faded out slowly, only for Mark to turn his back around and in absolute silence it appeared as if the crystals just disappeared. He was staring at absolutely nothing. What do I do now? He thought to himself. Ben found himself across a chasm impossible to cross on the opposite side where he was certain he saw a kyber crystal glowing. Instantly, he knew it was his to take. The entrance behind him shut itself sealed, which made him a little more nervous as he looked down to the emptiness just before his feet. His gaze fixed across the chasm. He was determined to get his crystal. The glacier on the surface rumbled once again, a noise that made Ben very uneasy. The star that Ilum was orbiting was setting slowly but surely, and the Jedi Masters were contemplating on what kind of adventures the young Padawans were getting into. Mark was staring into a wall of ice. His environment was as cold and as silent as a tomb. Why did the song stop? Why was he in the wrong chamber? It had to be, because it was the only chamber. He stepped closer to the frozen wall as he did, and he could discern an image on the other side. The closer, the clearer. It seemed that he saw another person across on the other side. He placed his hand instinctively, and he went through the wall. Mark could see a silhouette as well as his eyes could focus on, but he sensed a familiar presence. Ben. Behind Skywalker, the ground was slowly shrinking under his feet. The only way across the chasm from Mark's perspective was to jump on the other side, but Ben was frozen in place, full of doubt and perhaps a little bit of fear. Jump, was Mark's thought. It was loud enough for Ben to run to the very same thought in his own mind. But doubt wouldn't let him make it. His doubt was about more than just a leap of faith. He doubted it. He doubted a lot more than that. His heritage, his skill and power. Was he going to be able to live up to his father's name? A man who toppled an empire and saved the galaxy and trillions of lives? His focus ripped back to reality as the tremors continued to ripple through the levels below the icy surface. He looked down, but this time he didn't let his fears and doubts take over. He took a few steps back and He took a few steps back and put all he had into a sprint that would give his body the necessary push to make the jump. He put everything he could, combined with the will of his body and the power of the Force running through him. He made it across, and the feeling of defeating the poisonous doubts that plagued his mind was glorious, liberating. He then made it to where his kyber crystal was. He connected to it, looking intensely and surrendering to the Force. The colorless crystal accepted Ben as his keeper, and he smiled for the success of his quest. He imbued his energy into it. He closed his eyes and put his feelings into the kyber crystal. He wanted to do good and save lives, an example set by his father. He wanted to be as elegant with his lightsaber and master all forms in combat. A true guardian, like his father before, as well as his grandfather years earlier. Ben reopened his eyes. The crystal was not colorless anymore, for it now has an allegiance to him and him alone. A beautiful, majestic blue, the first one to be harvested in years. No surprise for a Skywalker, of course. Wow, this is amazing. I can feel it. I can't wait to construct my lightsaber, he said excitedly. The crystal began to illuminate, as if it shared his enthusiasm, so much so that it was so bright Ben had to shield his eyes. When the illumination died down, he found himself in a familiar hallway. The way out, he whispered. Okay, that wasn't whispering. Loud thinking. Okay, let me just check the chat a little bit and take another sip of water. How are we doing, guys, so far? Flip, I said low baka, not ooh baka. Oh man, this is great. I'm really enjoying this right now. Actually, this is a lot more fun than I thought it would be because I'm actually liking what I'm reading. I hope that you guys like it too. Let me know your impressions down below. Let me know what you guys think. It really means a lot to me. Your opinion really matters right now. So let's let's continue. Calataleo, what else? My friends. Anyway, let's continue. Mark sensed Ben shifting away from his current location, and it was time he continued with his own quest. He hopelessly wandered in the caves as the feeling that not only he failed but was lost started to set in mind. Before Mark could feed those desperate thoughts even more, he sensed another familiar presence. This time it was Terry, who was reliving a traumatic who was reliving the traumatic day he lost his family. I should keep my mind on the book. Sorry, not the not the chat. The debris, or it could be his mind, looked exactly like the ruins from his home. Fear began to swell in his mind. The screams of his family dying echoed throughout the caves. Terry began to tear up, and that led him to sob. Mark could hear his crying, and again from a different angle he could see it all play out. Knowing exactly what would cause Terry to break out like this, because he wasn't very talkative or too expressive, and being friends with Mark meant that he knew exactly the reason he was crying. Terry usually was very composed, but young Katarin could feel his pain and made it his own. He shed a tear as well. "You're not alone. We are your family," he said softly. Another thought that raced across the caverns of Ilum reached Terry as he heard the voice of his master. Sendaspas found him moments after the destruction of his home and took him in as a Padawan, not only because of his force potential, but because of what he was as a person. Master Pass wanted to cultivate that further and bring it outwards. Terry had a second chance of having a family and being a great person. His master's voice echo said to him that Terry wasn't alone, that the Jedi were now his family. The words of his master, actually Mark, encouraged Terry and brought him, and brought himself together. The ceiling was about to collapse as Terry closed his eyes and surrendered to the Force, relinquishing all of his fears and anxiety. The ice fell exactly on top of him, shocking Mark in the process, thinking Terry to be crushed. Mark rushed to help out his friends, but the ice brought down the whole ceiling and blocked them off. "Terry!" he yelled. Mark looked around for another pathway, any pathway, to go and get help. As he rushed through the corridors to get help, his focus immediately reverted to the songs of the crystals that slowly faded in, as if they reassured Mark that his friends were okay and that he had to focus on his own task. Again, he trusted his gut and decided to follow the hymn of the Force. Terry opened his eyes again only to see a huge icicle with a crack in it. Inside, a crystal was singing harmoniously because it was found by its owner. He looked around and saw the debris he looked around and saw the debris not only did not impact him, but was scattered all around him. The crack continued to break apart the enclosure that enveloped the crystal, as Terry didn't use physical force to break the transparent ice, but splayed his hand on it, calling onto the Force to assist him to liberate his crystal. The enclosure cracked, and Terry was finally able to liberate his kyber crystal. It floated ever so elegantly into his hand, the hymn singing. When he held it, the crystal opened a conversation with him through the Force, asking him what he wanted to become as a person. Anything was possible at that moment, a moment of true candor. In truth, Terry does not want to hurt anyone, not out of spite, and not even in self-defense if possible. That would be ideal, but the very power Jedi hold always incite a challenge from other beings and organizations in the galaxy that would try their luck to defeat a Jedi in the name of power and glory. Terry knew this all too well and understood that the time would come that he would have to defend the defenseless. It was a responsibility he had to undertake. Another skillful guardian in tune with the Force, reserved, patient, that acts only when is needed. With his emotions and thoughts put into the crystal, it would dye itself into a color befitting a Jedi of Terry's stance. Despite his extremely potent connection to the Force that would normally make a crystal emit a green color, the Force deemed it necessary that it should wield the color blue instead. Difficult time lies ahead, and the Jedi Order, as well as the galaxy, would be in need of a vigilant guardian such as Terry Anados. It would be no contest. Terry would excel in his lifetime. Terry opened his clenched fist only to reveal a beautiful blue, a tad lighter than that of Skywalker's. He was dazzled by the beauty of it. He had succeeded in his harvest. The debris that blocked his path was moved in a swing of his hand and through the command of the Force. Having cleared a path, he ran through the clearing and made way to find his way back to his master. Mark followed Terry in the hopes that he could be guided as his friend, sorry, to be guided, sorry, I made a grammatical mistake, to be guided to find a crystal for his own lightsaber. But again, he was alone. Just as he thought things were picking up, he was let down by his quest. The thought of failure started to weigh in on his mind even more this time. He got distracted again by the song of the crystals that only brought him frustration this time. Because as soon as he was set to find one, the trace would disappear. What if I'm not worthy? He thought to himself, his head looking down in a defeated manner. The song continued and echoed through another corridor that Mark just followed, like an anuba chases the scent of its prey. The glacier on the surface caused the floor Kira was standing on to collapse beneath her feet, and the altar-like surface holding the crystal she believed was hers was swallowed into a seemingly endless abyss. Sorry. So, if you understood, the crystal that Terry got was actually the one that Kira saw on the altar, but it wasn't hers. Ta-da! Plot twist. That's how you do it, Rian Johnson. She stood shocked, and shortly after, in anger that her crystal was gone. No, she yelled, the rays of light melting the ever-weakening pillars that were melting, and held the chamber that she was in place. Kira dropped on her knees, and before she could let panic dominate her every move, her will and the Force blocked any negative impulse she would otherwise give into. She closed her eyes, with the pillars melting and the ceiling rumbling, moments short of being brought down and burying her alive. Guide me, she whispered. At that moment, everything quietened around her as she entered a deep meditative state. The sun was closer to a full set as it began to dip into the horizon before disappearing entirely until the next dawn. That would come very, very later. When Kira opened her eyes, it was like she went deaf. She couldn't hear the ceiling coming apart and the ice blocks crashing down all around her. Suddenly, the only thing that crept into her audio reception was a faint song, a kyber crystal waiting to be liberated from her. She could hear it nearby, but she couldn't see it. Okay, quick bathroom break, and I'll be back in a few seconds. Hold on. Hey guys, sorry about that. I'm back. Bathroom break. I really, really need to go. Anxiety was not helping my bladder. I want to thank Benzo H and Hofcast for coming on. I really appreciate your presence, guys. So let's get back. Let's go. Okay, so okay. So where were we? Yeah, okay. The sun was setting, and she opened her eyes. She couldn't see her crystal. Mark Catarn made it to her location, and from his angle he could see what she could not. Her crystal embedded within the pillar of ice was melting. He understood that the only way to get it out was for it to melt completely. Patience was his thought. Kira fixed her gaze on the melting pillars as her sight and hearing aligned in the same place. She had found it, her own Kyber crystal. She did not want to force it out, not with another punch. She didn't want to use any physical violence at all. It was the will of the Force if the crystal was to be thawed out. She knew she had to wait for it. At this realization, her hearing resumed, but she did not mind her surroundings now that she found her crystal. Instead, she resumed her meditation and awaited for the Kyber crystal to be freed of its icy containment. The collapsing surrounding did motivate Mark to get out of there and follow a different path that becomes increasingly dangerous for him. Some time passes as the Kyber crystal is freed. It signals Kira to open her eyes. Her patience had paid off, and it's not something that she is known for. The Kyber crystal, as well as the melted pillar, shaped an hourglass, and this little crystal was at its center. It was revealed that it wasn't entirely made out of ice, but was rather conveniently made of Kyber. The Force willed it for her to collect this crystal in particular, and in this way. This is how she was to be showed. And she looked at it, and this crystal kept singing, asking her what she wanted to become, what she wants it to be. The crystal pierced her deepest thoughts so it could get to understand her, to become hers. Kira was already older than most trainees when she met her master, Jaden Kor, but her potential of greatness could not be ignored, combined with her potential in the Force. The conventional Jedi would not admit an individual to be inducted in the Jedi Order no older than 6, in fear of how the previous attachments could affect their training and their overall careers as Jedi. But the new generation of Jedi are encouraged to draw from their attachments and grant them motive and strength to protect with zeal till their last breath. Kira was exactly this kind of personality, fiercely loyal and very protective of her loved ones, a true fighter at heart. She could easily go toe to toe with the likes of Kyle Katarn and rob him of his title of Jedi Battle Master one day. It was her goal, actually, to be impeccable in combat, not just a good defender like Terry or a well rounded fighter like Ben, but the ultimate Jedi warrior. Her passion to become the best would concern the Jedi of old, and it cannot be ignored that a Jedi is not a soldier or just a mindless warrior. Then the dark side creeps itself easier in the hearts of those who relish combat. In the past, such a Jedi existed who could use the dark side in his favor, but ultimately belonged to the light. Yes, attachment is a great motivator, but can destroy you if you become obsessed to an unhealthy degree. Kira was fierce, and so her crystal took the color that suited her best purple, but not just a random purple as seen as the other trainees of the academy, a deep amethyst that would stand out from the rest, just like herself in combat in the future awaiting her. She was grateful that she managed to pick her crystal, put it but it was the only thing holding the whole column together. She she signified sorry, the rumble signified to her that it was time to retreat and to get out of there. So she ran from the direction Mark left from earlier, but she didn't know that Mark actually left from there. Speaking of Mark, he ran through the caverns, completely lost. His disappointment was becoming too heavy for him to bear. What do I tell Bruno? He thought. Letting down his master was the last thing that he wanted to do, but his frustration with this quest wasn't helping him complete it. In his moment of throwing a fit, he kicked against the wall in front of him. Why won't you help me? What must I do? Show me! He yelled in the caverns. The echo seemed to startle the quiet inside, as if the force answered back in a mighty fury. Everything around him began to shake uncontrollably. An enormous block of ice tumbled down slow enough for him to be able to stop it momentarily with his hands, but it was pure mass that was pushing him back against the wall. After stealing a quick glance behind him, he tried to put his strength back into the block and hold it before it crushed him. The tremors brought down a section of the cave where on the other side Lobaka was holding against a block of ice above his head, and his growls alerted Mark to his presence. "Lobaka, is that you?" he yelled from across the chamber. The strained Wookiee growled in confirmation while simultaneously trying to prevent himself from being crushed. Mark was surprised by the strength Lobaka was exhibiting, but it wasn't unusual for a Wookiee to be physically superior to humans. Encouraged by this, Mark yelled, "Push, Lobaka, you can do it," while trying to hold on himself. But his meager human strength was literally nothing compared to the might of a Wookiee, not to mention that Mark was underweight even for a human, so his stamina was already depleted. With every passing second, Lobaka succeeded and pushed the block upward, eventually away from him. His willpower was realized, and in accord to the Force, this already powerful Wookiee became a Titan. Seeing his friend not having the same measure of strength and being pushed back to his doom, Lobaka growled to Mark, saying something along the lines of, "I'm coming to save you, buddy," and ran to him. In the opportune moment, he lunged toward Mark, grabbed him in the nick of time as the block he failed to repel crashed against the wall and it broke open. There, Lobaka heard his kyber crystal in that opening and crept closer to it. Mark was on the floor trying to comprehend of how he made it alive. Lobaka took his kyber crystal out of his hand and put his feelings into it. Wookiees are loyal to anyone they pledge themselves to. They will follow their code religiously, and those who are in alignment with the light will make powerful allies to those who serve it. Lobaka was a vanguard, a loyal protector, using his power and strength to vanquish the dark side and all its traces. As a leading figure in this noble crusade, his crystal was not a yellowish hue as commonly seen in the Academy either. Lobaka's crystal was translated into a majestic gold. The mighty Wookiee, son of the even mightier Chewbacca, picked up Mark Katarn and checked to see if he could walk. "Thanks a lot, Lobaka," he said as he tried to orient himself. "How do we get out of here?" he followed. The two were looking for a way out. Lobaka took a look at Mark and asked him if he found his crystal. Mark was crushed with the idea that he might have just failed to get his own. It was obvious by his body language that he was disappointed. "Let's find a way out of here, Lobaka. Perhaps I might even be lucky on the way out," Mark said as they set off to find their masters. Only a sliver of the star that Ilum orbits was visible upon the horizon, and the caverns now began to freeze up rapidly. Departing the caves would be so much more different and difficult, from now on. The first one to make it back to the entrance where the masters, Paz and Kor, were waiting was Ben, Terry, and not so far behind, Kira. Master Paz's face was glowing with relief and glee. My, what have we here? How did you fare, my Padawans? Was the experience of the harvest a good one? He said excitedly. By the looks on their faces, Jaden smirked a little and put his shoulder over Terry, who was mixed with emotions of shock and terror. Was quite a ride, huh, Terry? Jaden said. He was speechless, and Ben expressed how he felt the idea that he could have fallen into the chasm while jumping to reach the other side. But he also feels a sense of accomplishment and growth for having harvested his crystal. He learned something today. They all did. Kira came along later and vented out about her experience of the gathering. I almost got killed for this thing, she exclaimed. Jaden stepped in to calm his apprentice and held her by the shoulders, saying that he would never have given her a task she couldn't handle or that would put her life at risk. Let me have a look at it, Jaden said while sitting back to see the crystal verse. When Jaden put it in her hand, when she put out her hand and Jaden saw the color of her crystal, they were both mesmerized. All of them were. Senda swooned at the sight of its beauty. Lobaka and Mark made it in time for the group to return home on Yavin 4. before the ice-cold night cycle could affect them. But the students were all sitting safely before the ship made its jump to light speed. The runner was swallowed by the depths of space itself. Now, having entered hyperspace, the students were all checking out each other's crystals and huddled together in a circle. Mark Katarn, as usual, was left out, but this time not because he was getting frustrated by another student at the academy, but because he had nothing to show or discuss. Lobaka was the last to show his crystal to everyone. But when his show was over, they all turned to Mark and asked him the same question, one that would hurt him all too much. He hated being left out despite his lonely nature, and he braced for it anyway, as he couldn't avoid it for long, as Kira was the one to make the question that everyone had in mind. Hey, Mark, let's see your crystal. Where is it? Mark was in tears, but responded in a very calm manner, so false that one cannot be so monotone when they're emoting. Even in sadness, I didn't get one. He coldly responded to them all. Sendas and Jaden heard this response and went to comfort him. The failure made Mark feel unequal and unworthy to be in the company of his peers. Sendas's smooth voice and poetic rhyme was not enough to make him feel better, and Jaden told him a story that most in the academy never knew, how Jaden Kor got his lightsaber. I got my crystal out of Ilum. The Force has its hotspots, if you will, across the galaxy, and interferes with the material realm much more than usual there. I got my Kyber crystal in the most unlikeliest places of the galaxy. I was on Telos when I discovered my Force sensitivity, and it took me a while after to find my own crystal. It was like the Force willed it. Not long after, I applied for the Jedi Academy, where I met your father, and I was put under his tutelage. Master Sendas Pass, now in a more serious tone, told Mark that perhaps it was not his destiny to find his crystal on Ilum. Your crystal will come in time to you, my boy, he said calmly to Mark, hoping that his serenity could match in turn. I'm a failure. I couldn't hear any song, nothing that was mine to hear anyway. Mark paused. Maybe I should be a pilot like Mom and bring in cargo for the Republic base, while the rest of you go on to train into knighthood. Ben, knowing Mark the best, detected his drama and sarcastically answered to him in a way for him to drop his act. Oh, please, not just knighthood. Some of us want to become masters too, he told Mark. Mark turned his back to Ben in frustration, but he knew when to let him be and when to tag along and keep him company. And a good friend was what Mark Qatar needed right now. Sorry about that, guys. I'm just trying to relax. Don't be a drag, man, Ben told Mark in a way to get him to knock out of it. We'll talk to Master Vorse and he might have a solution. Mark nodded in compliance. That's all he could do. Ben held his friend's shoulder and told him one last thing before the ship emerged out of hyperspace into Yavin's orbit. Don't be stupid. You're going to be a great Jedi too, with your lightsaber and all. The ship made it to the atmosphere, just a few moments as it slowly made its descent to its destination, Luke Skywalker's academy. The Masashi Temple, home of the current Jedi Council, could be seen from miles away. A few miles before the temple itself were the training grounds that were divided into categories where the Jedi of homogeneous groups of students ranked by their power levels and official rank and the order could be seen as from above as clear as day. Sorry. The runner was a few meters away from landing when something unusual happened in the horizon. Several rebel ships, ranging from single fighters like the X-Wing and Y-Wing up to larger transports and frigates, all made it for the atmosphere as if they were going for a planetary scale invasion. One on the side of the planet where the mass evacuation is taking place on the old rebel base, a loyal pilot to Princess Leia, Kala G refused to leave the base as he was loyal to the Republic, a cause that his father fought for years ago. Leia was transmitting to any of the grounded pilots that stayed behind for the Republic to block the escape of any defecting pilots and bring as many alive for questioning. Leia herself gave the order to shoot down a ship if necessary. Kalaji and the rest of the pilots got into their X-wings since all the rebel pilots have launched but aren't out of the atmosphere left. The pilots thought it would be a skirmish in their favor due to their current role of pursuers with little resistance. Some defectors tailed back towards their own brothers with the intent to shoot them down. Kalaji loses his first wingman and blasts two enemy fighters out of the sky. He looks down on the crashed ships and said almost comically, "Oh, no survivors there." Two X-Wing fighters on the run toward the defectors' fleet have two Republic X-Wings on their tail. One of the two fighters returns to stall and possibly take down Kalaji and his remaining wingman, but only manages to ground Kalaji's wingman and get destroyed by him in turn. One ship remains. Still not in the clear, and Kala focuses fire with reduced blaster intensity on the engines of the fugitive fighter, so as not to destroy the ship entirely. As calculated, the pilot is up against the wall. Eject and save your life, or crash and take any useful secrets with you to the grave, not betraying your brothers, the defectors. That was the only choice Kalaji gave the enemy pilot, but being very young, lacking the guts it takes to die for a cause, the enemy pilot ejects to save his life. The deed was done. Kalaji marked the defector's location, and it would be only a matter of time until this boy breaks during the interrogation and confesses everything to Leia and her team. On the other side of the temple, Jedi Master Ares Qualtor, a tall human male 6'4", with long hair and green eyes, and the one who was the reception to the Jedi returning from the harvest. I screwed up here. Sorry. The shuttle opened its landing ramp, and two masters and 5 students got out. "How was the crystal harvest, masters?" Ares asked. "Oh, it had its moments," Sendas answered on behalf of the whole crew. The masters had to report to the council on the mission to Ilum and that their students about to complete their lightsabers. Kira motioned to everyone to go and put their lightsabers together. All went but Ben, who went to find his master with Mark. The two entered the temple and made way to the main courtyard in hopes of spotting their master there. They looked around the area twice, and the next place they made for was the comms center and relayed a message from there. Bruno was on a mission, sanctioned by Leia for over 7 years. Despite her being against the idea of a clone army, Bruno had a long talk with Leia and tried to get her to see beyond the clones and what they were. With the old journal of Captain Rex, who was now on his last leg, Bruno was able to retrace and replicate the process and its steps on how the people involved in the proper capital to support the commission of a new clone army. A lot of people were involved and on board with this idea. It was Leia with ideological problems that had her doubts. But Bruno tried to comfort her and tried to tell her that it was not just about the clones. It wasn't just about a Star Destroyer. It wasn't about what they were wearing. It was about the ideology. And today it was proof that she was betrayed by the very ideology that she had trusted for years. The rebellion symbol that she had proudly worn on her ships and on the uniforms of her personnel and fighters was a disgrace today for her. She could not bear to look at it. She was betrayed by the very cause that she tried so hard to build. Man, phew, that's intense. I actually can't believe I wrote that. Leia came to understand that it doesn't matter if she's in a rebel cruiser or a Star Destroyer, but as long as she was doing the right thing. And today, after what she saw, pilots, soldiers, and staff that she had known and fought for to liberate the galaxy for over 20 years had just sold her out just like that, on a whim. Times were changing, and it doesn't matter with whom or what she achieves to maintain peace in the New Republic, but as long as it's done. The Galactic Civil War, had just evolved her to think this way. The young pilot Kalaji brought a live prisoner as she requested. "Well done," she said. "You're to be commended for your bravery and your loyalty. Your father would be very proud," Leia said. "Your words are of the highest of honors, Your Highness. Thank you," he responded ever so humbly. He left the defector with Leia, saluted her, and left. Leia and two other officers took the defector to the interrogation chambers, where she would pick apart every last bit of information from the traitorous pilot. It was only a matter of time. Leia wanted to know what was happening there. Mark and Ben opened the transmission, and unfortunately, Bruno was able to answer. Unfortunately, he was not close. How did you guys do in the harvest? Bruno asked. But Mark told him that he was unable to extract a crystal for his lightsaber. Oh, he said awkwardly. We'll discuss this when I return with our fleet, boys. The hologram dispersed, and they looked at each other in confusion. What fleet? Mark said while Ben shrugged his shoulders. I want to check something in the real hangar quick, Ben. Can you do it again for me? Mark said carefully in his ear. Ben looked at him and said, You know, one of these days someone's bound to notice that you're missing, he said. Of course they know. They're just letting me for now, Mark responded confidently. Which is even worse. Look, I'll pitch up again this time, but I can't do this indefinitely. Thanks, pal. I promise I'll make it up to you sometime, Mark said to Ben. Being the son of Jan Ors, he had the blood of a true pilot running through his veins, and he dreams of the day he comes of age so that his parents can pass on the ship to him. The Raven's Claw. Jan would often fly with Mark for supply runs, and that is where he dabbled with his piloting skills. Bruno thought it as a part of his training and encouraged flight practice in any form presented to his two apprentices. As he sneaked into the hangar where the Raven's Claw was in repairs and maintenance, Jan was inspecting her ship for anything that required her attention. When he saw her son approaching, she put on a bright smile and went to hug him. For Jan, Mark was her life. Her son was her life. She achieved the most precious thing in the whole galaxy, a family. But her smile was quite short when she saw her face. It doesn't take one too powerful in the Force to notice something was wrong with a boy. There he is, my Jedi star. What's wrong, honey? Jan said softly to Mark. Mark tilted his head down in disappointment and shame for failing his quest. I wasn't able to get a crystal, Mom, he said in a sad tone. I guess I'll apply to be a pilot like you and go on a few runs here and there. Maybe a dogfight with some pirate scum. I may not cut it to be as a Jedi as I wanted, he had. Oh, sweetie, you're a late bloomer, Jan said. You have always been. Give it time and everything will fall into place. Just don't push it so much. Mark responded in frustration because he considered being late at anything pointless. They all got it now. Why do I have to be left out again? They all have a crystal, Mom, Mark said. Jan did not have the answer, but she gave one the only way she knew how. Tough love. Mark Katarn whining about it doesn't get anything done any faster. If you are one step behind, that means you'll have to work twice as hard to be one step ahead of everyone. Now, are you going to sulk about it or find a solution? Jan responded in a more serious tone Mark likes to call tough love mode. When Jan is in this mode, there is no getting on top of her in an argument. Kyle knows this better than anyone, so Mark stopped the complaints. I guess I'll have to ask Bruno and wait for him to come back and see what he says about this, he said with a much clearer mind. Jan softly smiled again as her hands crossed, and she said to him, Now that's a start. She hugged him again and dismissed him because it was only a matter of time until Ben could no longer cover for him. Mark just exited the hangars as a group of Jedi trainees looked at him in a very dismissive way and whispered about him not returning with a crystal and laughed at him for it. Under other circumstances, he would take time to pick a fight, and there was no time for a squabble. All he could grant them was a look that years from now a lot of enemies would learn to fear. But for now, his face looks nothing more than a frustrated pup, and that made them laugh even more. This was the motive Mark needed to construct a lightsaber of his own. He would train with it and become so proficient that he wanted to defeat everyone who ever had a problem with him in a sparring session. Eventually, he would overcome them. Mark was dwelling on his own thoughts just outside the hangar area until a New Republic soldier who was accompanying Ben Skywalker snapped him out of his daydream. Padawan Katarn, Master Bruno has arrived and has asked to see you in the courtyard as well. He sprung back into his lively state because he was eager to see his master, and he wanted to tell him about his misadventures on Ilum. The soldier escorted the two Padawans, and indeed there he was. Master Bruno was 6 feet tall, 2 inches, with dark skin and a very characteristic afro. A long dreadlock that spans all the way to his knees was one of the most characteristic things that you could see on Bruno Vors. He was born on Scarif, 5 years before the Clone Wars erupted in the galaxy. Although the war never came to Scarif, the Republic had established a weapons factory, and there one of the galaxy's cutting edge, and there was also, one of the galaxy's cutting edge research facilities. We all know what happened on Scarif, people. After the transition from the Republic to the Empire, he was driven away from his home and got separated by his family during a roundup the Imperials did to use the locals as slave labor for the Empire's operations there. Okay, let me just see what you guys are doing in the chat. Want to see if there's anyone new to greet. Okay. My bros. Anyway, I hope you guys are enjoying it so far. Let me just take another sip. Okay. Okay. During the Clone Wars, Bruno spent time getting to know the clones and accommodating them with whatever rations he could provide from time to time. He was utterly fascinated by them. Bruno also met a Mandalorian pilot who was stationed there and saved Bruno by taking him up as his own son to spare him the life of a slave. It was a Mandalorian custom to inherit and bring new people into the Mandalorian culture. Mandalorians are a proud and rich culture with a high morality code and fierce reputation of loyalty and honoring the significance of family, friends, and tradition. The pilot, named Cyrus Vors, an ancestor to the House of Kryze, raised Bruno in the history and warrior ways of the Mandalorians. Cyrus was against the Empire for enslaving entire worlds and bringing endless suffering. Because of the stance he took, it wouldn't take long for the Imperial Supercommandos, led by the traitorous Gar Saxon, to locate and silence him for speaking against the Emperor. Once again, Cyrus Vors gave his life to Bruno, but this would be the last time. For the first time in his life, he was directionless and barely escaped with his life. For years, the rebellion fought the Empire. Bruno was working as a smuggler to make ends meet. One fateful day, his employer, a Hutt called Groxa, sent him to Lacana, a planet in the... I'm going to explain that much later. Okay, in the expansion region, Lacana, to find a rumored Jedi artifact there, a holocron. Groxa was left free to operate in the crime world with no restrictions since the head of Hutt families was gone. The Hutts under Jabba would never dare to reach that far into the expansion region, but a Jedi holocron was worth the pay and the trouble. Bruno met Luke Skywalker there, who was also searching for the same thing. He sensed Bruno's sensitivity to the Force and told him that he was meant for something much more than just a smuggler. Upon agreement, Bruno left the holocron with Luke, and he was promised that they would meet again when the time was right, and that he would help him discover his potential in depth. Almost 15 years later, and Bruno has become one of the best Jedi of his time, all thanks to the guidance of Luke Skywalker, teachings that he will now pass on to his son, and the son of Kyle Katarn in turn. He turned around to greet his students, and he was in a rather good mood. "Tell me all about it, boys," he chuckled. Ben showed him his crystal and was simply mesmerized by its beauty. "Ben, you put your feelings into this Kyber crystal, and you've achieved an impressive feat." Mark felt worse for not having anything to show for. Bruno didn't need to see Mark to sense his frustration, and a tad of jealousy for Ben. "Tell me, Mark, what happened with you? Did you learn anything?" he said while still being in a good mood. "Nothing, Master. Absolutely nothing," he said disappointedly. "Remember what I told you about every situation?" he asked. "Master, I tried to hear the song of the crystals as I was told, and every time I thought I was getting close, it just stopped. I would just come up a few feet away from everyone else just before they got theirs. That's all," Mark explained. "There was no lesson to be learned." Bruno stroked his beard in confusion. A quite curious situation yours is, my apprentice. Still, there's something to be learned here, he said. You know, not every Jedi got their crystals on Ilum. There are other bountiful planets in the galaxy where one can obtain kyber, he added. I want you to go to your quarters, freshen up, relax, and meditate. The solution will present itself earlier than you think. But be open, be patient. These words reassured Mark as he set off to his quarters, but he did not leave just yet. Master, where is the fleet that you were talking about? Ben asked. Bruno looked up, and Ben's eyes followed. Mark took a little to catch on, but he also looked up. In the skies of Yavin, a fleet of 3 Nebula-class star destroyers and 5 escort frigates were visible from ground level. The 2 Padawans were awestruck, for all they had ever seen were some small recon ships, never a star destroyer. You came back in those, Master? Mark asked enthusiastically. Bruno nodded. The kids were gawking at the fleet until Bruno had to dismiss them. I have to report to Master Skywalker, and after that we can figure out your crystal crisis, my apprentice, Bruno told his Padawans, while turning around and making it toward the upper levels of the Massassi temple to find Luke. Okay, guys, we're almost done, I swear. Mark enjoyed a warm shower that made up for the chilly hours he spent in the frostbitten caves of Ilum and proceeded to clear his mind. The sun was setting on the 4th moon of Yavin, and the cries of the wildlife that becomes active during the nighttime was something that calms him down tremendously, whereas others are usually creeped out by the sounds of howlers that reside deep in the jungles and ruins. For Mark, it was the focus he needed to meditate. As his focus grew stronger, he could hear a faint sound, a familiar tune. The answer to his quest was close by. Despite all this unrest, he could sense all around him, with half of the New Republic forces evacuating Yavin 4, with all of the concerns of a steering war, Mark could find perfect harmony. He was determined more than ever to complete his task, because his lightsaber would not be just a weapon, but also a tool that could help restore the disrupted galaxy back in order. It was his duty to do so. The hymn of the Force hinted Mark that due to his noble thoughts, he would be granted to achieve his goal very, very soon. It was destiny, the will of the Force. His meditation would be cut short after the knock. His meditation would be cut short at the knock of his chamber door. Luke Skywalker had just returned from a conference with the rest of the New Republic leaders that remained regarding how to deal with this move from the defectors and their contemplations of another war breaking out. Mark, may I come in? Luke asked. Mark stood up properly to greet his master. Please enter, Master Skywalker. The door slid open, and the aura of Luke's presence became noticeable. I was told that you didn't manage to find your crystal today, Luke said. For a moment, Mark entertained the idea of him being removed from the academy. Luke smiled. Mark, not all Jedi are defined for possessing a lightsaber. My own mentor didn't possess one, actually. It's not the lightsaber that makes a Jedi, my friend. Mark was surprised and got a huge load off his chest. He was relieved. Even so, it's still a failure, isn't it, Master Skywalker? Mark asked. It is, Luke replied, and went on. Do you think that none of us have failed before? It's through failure that we learn. And I believe that you learned a great many things today. So in a way, you've learned a lot more than you thought you did. I couldn't imagine you ever failing at anything, Master, Mark responded. Luke laughed at the idea of not failing, as memory flashes of his own shortcomings played in his head. Dagobah, Yoda, the stones, the ship. He paced with Mark through the hallways while he was explaining to him what he saw in the caverns was a lesson each time Mark encountered them. Where the rest only took one, Mark got 4 lessons. He knew what he needed to be done for them to succeed. From this perspective, Mark felt that he had achieved something today, but the day was far from done. You will find that things happen in a certain way, Mark Katarn, that at a given time seems outlandish and silly that things transpired so. The answer will present itself, but it will come in many forms. Just mind your surroundings and you'll find it. Your future is bright, and the Jedi will be very lucky to have you as a guardian one day. Luke said to Mark. With the boy being dumbfounded by Luke's wisdom. I mean, yeah, I would be dumbfounded by Luke's wisdom as well. This isn't me. This is Luke Skywalker. I didn't write this. I just cited Luke Skywalker. So yeah. Okay, sorry. Where were we? Mark went in the training area. Okay, no, I actually skipped ahead. I screwed up. I'm really, really sorry. Okay. They walked around the temple, and after completing a lap around Mark's quarters, Luke was needed elsewhere. Mark went into the training arena to find his father, who wanted to talk to him about the crystal harvest as well. Kyle had just finished instructing a group of semi-advanced Jedi who had just been promoted to the rank of Jedi Initiate. Up until recently, months ago, they too were Padawans. I'm sorry about that. No fear, no coronavirus here. I just choked on my drink. Kyle had his back turned while he was recalibrating one of the training sabers as he asked, I hear you're missing a crystal? At this age, Mark doesn't understand his father's playfully sarcastic question was just an icebreaker. He thought it as a disapproval from his dad, and that caused him to snap. Yeah, I can't find a stupid crystal, so I guess I'm a loser, huh? Mark said frustratedly. Mark would be hurt every time his son misunderstood him, and his mood was suddenly ruined by Mark's tone. I can yell too, kid, he shouted towards his son, who noticed a few other trainees, staring at him and not wanting to give them things to talk about. Mark turned around at his father and dialed his tone down significantly. I'm sorry, I just got caught up helping the others, and by the time I got looking for mine, there wasn't any more time, and Mark was babbling defensively. Do you know why you failed, Mark? Because you didn't prioritize yourself. And when you do that, you always come after and you get nothing done, Kyle told his son. So I'm not supposed to help my friends? Mark responded angrily. I never said that you shouldn't help people, but how can you help others when you can't help yourself first? Sorry about that. I just saw a flash of light outside. Okay, that was really creepy. Hold on. Can you guys just give me a second? Sorry about that. Jesus Christ, man. It's just a little bit of thunder. Okay, where was I? Intense father-son fight. Let's go back. Kyle counters. Mark yelled again towards his father. I thought that a Jedi is supposed to help others and be selfless and put others first, at the top of his lungs. Kyle sent Mark packing with a logical response to his adolescent mind that had no answer for. And here goes. Sometimes others are counting on you to succeed first because one day they might depend their lives on your actions. Only you can take responsibility for. If you fail yourself, you fail them all, kid. I hope that day never comes because if I have to count on you, then I'm in real deep. So yes, prioritize. Help yourself first, and when you're responsible enough, you can do good for everyone else. The intention alone doesn't cut it. Stop putting yourself last. Mark broke down when he heard his dad saying that he can't rely on him and stormed out. Kyle shook his head and resumed preparing the training arena for tomorrow's session. One day he'll understand, he said quietly to himself. Bruno calmed Kyle to report to Leia to aid in the ongoing investigation of the defective pilot Kalaji shot down earlier. Bruno summoned his apprentices to a specific spot. Those three liked to hang out, Bruno and Mark being the other two. That's where they discuss and sometimes they even eat. It's at the eastern side of the Masasi Temple, and although it's close enough to see the jungle and have access to outlying trees closest to the temple, it is also safe enough to be out there. The three congregated there and made themselves very comfortable. I suggest we go on an excursion to clear our minds. I will excuse your absence and we're good to go. Bruno said. Sorry about that. I'm not sick, I swear. The boys loved going on planetary travels. Bruno thought it important for them to experience the galaxy and its vast diversity of worlds and people. Pre- Prepare and take what's necessary with you. Chop chop, he said, but they had already vanished, which made Bruno laugh with how energetic teenagers are. It didn't take long, and they were all set to go. With the clearance of the Order and its two leading figures, Luke and Kyle, the Raven's Claw took off in the night sky of Yavin. With the ship in orbit, Ben and Mark looked outside of the windows, admiring the red planet that dwarfs the Sorry, my nose is actually running right now. With the ship in orbit, Ben and Mark looked outside of the windows, admiring the red planet that dwarfs the tiny blue and green moon they live on. Where to? Bruno asked, as his face shone with the blue with the holomap display. Mark began to feel a strange sensation as he gazed deep into space. The Force was calling him to his destination. Bruno and Ben could also sense that something was up with Mark. And Bruno, using his much stronger attunement to the Force, tapped into what his apprentice was feeling. For Mark, it was just a feeling, a premonition, a warning of some kind, but he could not interpret what the Force was saying just yet, but a seasoned master could. It said Letaria. That's what it was saying to the boy. Bruno opened his eyes, looked to the holomap, and input the coordinates for the Apollyon system. The ship's engines whirred at maximum rotations and disappeared in the blackness of space. Ben had already constructed his lightsaber while Mark was talking with Luke, as the rest did, and it was time for Mark to construct his own this time. Whew, how are we going? We're almost done, I swear. We're almost done, guys. Okay. Okay. Not bad. Okay, guys. So, back on Yavin 4, Leia had left the interrogation too long as she was torn as to what to address first. She never got a chance to talk to Bruno about Project Epistrophe, the new fleet, whom she is severely understaffed to man, nor could she wrap her head around the fact that just over half of the New Republic Navy and Army left her, just there. All she needed to know is the reason why and the heading. The pilot was telling the truth about not knowing the true motive, and all that mattered was that he wanted to leave the New Republic because he too believed that it was going to fail, and chances were much better to survive with the Intersectionist Alliance, who managed to enlist the Mon Calamari system over a decade ago, giving them the best odds for a superior fleet and a salary as well. For Leia, he fought just as a rebel, with only freedom as his superior reward. But now with a stable government, freedom doesn't fill your belly, keep you clean, or warm at night without finances. Leia let Kyle assume the interrogation while she went to talk to Bruno about Epistrophe. But he left his trusted aide there who would fill her in on every detail she needed. A man called Iron Bill, Laconian born, a culture that could rival Mandalorians in terms of the values they seem to share, with a lot in common also. Bill was hardened as a man, and he was appointed to recruit more hands for the New Republic, also as to serve as the head instructor at the Frendesta Training Academy until Bruno's project came through. It was almost time, actually. Project Epistrophe had to be in action. Kyle was not as diplomatic as Leia or Luke, so he decided to make the poor pilot spill his guts out regarding where the location of the New Republic defectors were amassing their fleet. It took just a while, but the pilot cracked and told him the location of the fleet. Kyle and Luke were in disbelief when they heard the system. They both made it out of the interrogation room and said for Leia to tell what they found out. The Raven's Claw jumped out of hyperspace in the Apollyon system, a rather large planet with about a dozen moons orbiting around it. The moon they were going to land on was a moon called Letaria, as instructed by the will of the Force. The ship set down on the beautiful and lush green landscape as they all got out of the ship and were inspecting their new environment with awe. The ship's transmitter chimed and Bruno went to answer, presumably to report on their location. Kyle's portrait popped up, mid torso, and was visible holographically. His concern was also visible too and written all over his face. Bruno, where are you? He asked with a tone that also bothered Bruno. We're on Letaria and the Apallian system. Why? What's wrong? He answered. There's no time. The defectors are converging close, if not exactly on your location. You gotta get out of there. Now, Kyle exclaimed. There are no ships so far, Bruno was saying while interrupted by the signaling bleeps of the Claw's scanners. 5 massive ships were entering the system. Master, 5 dreadnoughts entered the system. They're huge, Men said while relaying the data on the screen. Mark was outside and was overshadowed by the ships cruising over them. You mean these ships, right? He said sarcastically. Kyle, it's about too late to make an escape without being noticed. Our best hope is to lay low for a while and hope they are not going to notice us. But Kyle has absolute faith that Bruno would keep his apprentices safe. Kyle, you might need to send in the fleet, he added, and then kill the Khan. The Raven's Claw lay hidden in the cover of the forest, but all they had to do is move away from the ship in case they discovered. As they were making their way through the foliage, hoping to find a settlement to spend the night, Bruno had... Sorry. They were making their way, foliage, settlement, spend the night. Okay. However, it was in Bruno's nature to investigate the situation and gather as much information as possible. Answers to questions Leia has made. Surely enough, they all find a small village home to 2 native tribes, human settlers, the Mukan clan and the Seratan clan. These colonists, however, came from generations of humans that did not pursue space travel and settled permanently on Letaria, having left the arts of chartography and astrology behind. These natives were in the majority farmers. They would not get visitors often in their small settlement, but they knew that they could trust fellow humans to an extent. The chieftain and elder of the Mukan clan greeted them first as they made it to the village together. Welcome to Letaria, strangers. I'm the elder of the Mukan clan. It is not often we get visitors on our moon. What brings you here? She asked. Bruno answered in a very diplomatic answer. Excuse our intrusion, O elder. We are Jedi who seek refuge for one rotating in your village and will be on our way. The elder detected haste in Bruno's response. What troubles you, young Jedi? She asked. Bruno looked at the horizon and saw smaller recon ships entering their sector. He pointed towards them and said, That. The recon gunships circled around once and landed near the village. Bruno, his students, and the elder had already taken shelter in the village. As she set out with an escort of clan warriors to see what the new invaders wanted, Bruno made his students stay back as he went to investigate at nightfall, so long as the elder did not get any trouble for the intersectionists who had just landed. Bruno peeked outside and saw that these weren't just intersectionist alliance troops, but there were Kangors in their ranks involved also. This was conclusive proof Bruno had been looking for years. He knew that there was a connection between both factions, Kangors and intersectionists, but the fact that they were aligned was very bad news for the Republic. Bruno had a contingency in case his suspicions came true about the impending threat of war that the intersectionist alliance could start. Sorry about that. Project Epistrophe was the answer. It seems that it needs to be enacted now. War is inevitable. Night falls over the starry sky of Letaria, and Bruno was ready to set off and investigate the intersectionists. With Kangors involved, prisoners are an absolute certainty, so he instructed his Padawans to flee with as many villagers as possible and to set up an emergency beacon so the fleet can at least buy them time to get off-world when they reach the Raven's Claw. Get some rest, and whenever something seems out of place, warn the rest and get out of here, Bruno said. and he left in the dark wilderness, to be continued on the 17th. Okay, guys, this was my first reading of the fan fiction here. There's a lot more going on. I really hope that you guys enjoyed whatever I had to share. I'm done. So, if you have anything to ask, anything that you want to see, I really hope that some of you that didn't manage to get the to catch the actual live premiere, I hope that you managed to at least watch the replay. Uh, this is my story, and I promise that it expands into something more. There's a lot more to talk about, to discuss. I haven't even gotten to the part where Mark Katarn gets his crystal yet, and he gets his crystal. I'll just let you into some spoilers into the next part. He gets his crystal, and he constructs his lightsaber on this moon. Um, so yeah, there's a lot more to tell, and I will be issuing my fan fiction, and there's going to be a lot of parts. I'm actually going to break them down into much smaller videos, possibly like 20-minute episode videos, so you guys can actually watch at your leisure. I hope that you guys enjoyed this. I really really appreciate your support. It's something very important to me. Thank you so much for watching. If you guys have any questions right now before I sign off, I'll be very happy to you know to to answer anything right now. And otherwise, I'm gonna sign out. I really really appreciate the fact that you guys made it right here. So I'm gonna have to sign out right now because my people need me. My people being my friends. I promised that I'd hang out with them much later. Aneveno pano tora se ligo, malaki serhome. So thank you so much, guys, for sticking around. I will come up with part two. Hopefully, I can get more people involved the next time around. Thank you so much. Really, really much. I really can't stop thanking you guys. Um, Stay tuned for the next part of the fan fiction, which a lot more action is going to be taking place. Not just a setup like this one where I'm setting up the characters, but it's also an introduction. So if I don't set the characters up, you won't be able to understand them. Thank you so much again, and I will have more action in the next part, in chapters 4, 5, and 6. Until then, I really appreciate it. General Katarn has to sign out right now, so thank you again, thank you. Later, guys.